Yukiyo Odate from Tokyo, Japan. I still do not believe that there's magic on learning new languages. We still need to memorize new words and also need self training of outputting of what you learn. So I was always looking for more systematic way of learning new languages faster. This barbecue site in the background is my hometown called Ome, about an hour away from the central Tokyo. Can you believe that Tokyo still has this kind of place with a lot of nature? I grew up in the family running this barbecue site leisure business and construction business. The first time I traveled abroad was when I was 21 years old. Today, I am delighted to share my experience of self training and tips on how I learned the languages with completely different grammar and culture under this environment. Mainly, I will show you the cases of Japanese speakers who learn English. Now, let's move to inside the tent of our barbecue site, which has a lot of Mexican racks, so that you guys also can feel like being in Mexico. Now, move to the presentation. Okay, welcome to my presentation, Tips for Learning Languages with Completely Different Grammar and Culture. Apply the Japanese speaker's cases to yours. Now, this is me in the costume and this character called Ramen Man. It's one of the characters from the animation called Kinnikuman, or long years ago. So maybe the kids currently don't know. And as I mentioned earlier, I was born and grew up in the west part of Tokyo called Ome City, born in a family who speaks only Japanese. And I currently live in the central Tokyo with my husband, who is from Mexico, and my 14 years old son, and my brother-in-law. And about the language, I speak Japanese as a mother tongue, and business level of English, and intermediate level of Turkish and Spanish. And I just recently started to learn Esperanto this year. And I studied French when I was a university student, but I don't speak it at all recently, so I need to brush up to start speaking again. And my interests, you can see my interests and you may think I am an aggressive person, and yes, you are right, I am. And I was too aggressive and assertive compared to other Japanese and had short-tempered when I was young. So actually practicing karate made me learn to control my mind well. By the way, I am a black belt holder. And I also enjoy driving and riding motorcycle and camping, etc. And about the language and culture, I am especially interested in the languages in the West Asia, such as Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan. And I would like to learn the languages in the near future. So hopefully I can network with people who are interested in the areas and also with people who are originally from the areas. Now move to my main presentation content. And this presentation will be focused on the three main contents, which the language learners should know before learning a new language if they would like to learn faster. and also to learn a language in a culture respected manner. And the contents will be one, cultural differences in terms of high context, low context. Two, mindset of learners. Three, grammar differences showing interlanguage transition and steps. And those will be introduced with example of Japanese speakers who actually like have difficulties in learning English. And if you learn those three, it makes you to learn faster easily and communication well with less misunderstandings or getting to a more advanced level in your target language. Next. First, number one, cultural differences in terms of high context and low context. This is a global culture classification from Edward Hall studies on high context and low context. And Japan is on, as you can see on the top, high context culture. And North America, where English is spoken, is more towards to low context. And I have met a lot of non-Japanese people who speaks very fluent Japanese, but I sometimes feel uncomfortable from how they talk to me. And this could be one of the reasons from the cultural differences in terms of high context and low context. If you know these cultural communication differences between high and low, it may help you to build the human relationship better. In a high context culture where the building of the human relationship is important, to be able to communicate smoothly without making people feel uncomfortable will be regarded as one of the smart techniques and skills. So if you don't know those differences, even you are able to communicate the facts, people may not like how you talk and feel uncomfortable and possibly may have personal problems with you in the future. Now, here is a summary of low context tendencies. A low context culture relies on explicit communication. In low context communication, more of the information in a message is spelled out and defined. And cultures with Western European roots, such as the United States and Australia, are generally considered to be low context cultures. We just go through quickly this low context part, just you may pay attention to highlight it in red square in the part of interaction and learning. These will be important in my later topic in the interlanguage section. Now, about a high context culture. High context culture relies on implicit communication, unlike low context, just the opposite, and no verbal cues. In high context communication, a message cannot be understood without a great deal of background information. Asian, African, Arab, Central European, and Latin American cultures are generally considered to be high context cultures. And look at the interaction part. It says verbal messages are indirect and disagreement is personalized. You may see the example later in my topic in the conversation between a boss and an employee in dialogues. In the learning part, it says learning occurs by observing others as they model or demonstrate and then practicing. Accuracy is valued. This will be explained and connected in the session of mindset of Japanese learners later. Okay, this is the indirect verbal communication cases to show the high context culture. And this is a conversation in the office in the high context culture. And look at the example one. Okay, boss A says, 先月2人も退職して手が足りなくてね。困ってるんだよね。Meaning in English, only literally, it says two people left the company last month and I now need to handle all the jobs they were used to be responsible for. And employee B says, answered, 大丈夫です。今日僕残業できますよ。In English meaning, don't worry, I can stay longer and help you. And in the example one, the boss A is not really asking literally the employee B to stay and help his work. However, the employee B answers that he can stay and help him or her, assuming that the boss implies the request to him because the boss is in trouble handling a lot of jobs. Now look at example 2. Boss C says, そういえば、例のあれ、進捗どう Speaking of which, how's the progress? An employee D says, すみません。なかなか進められていません。I'm sorry, I haven't started anything yet. In example 2, the boss A does not talk specifically which job or project's progress, but the employee C knows which one the boss is asking about from the context or the work recently they are involved together. As you can see those examples, in a high context society, the listener has more responsible to understand the conversation. The speaker provides a little information, and the listener analyzes and collects the speaker's cultural background, surrounding information, and the past conversations, and then answer accordingly. On the other hand, in the low context society, the speaker has more responsibility to communicate with clear words and explanations. So, in the high context communication, there are a lack of words and information you may get from the speaker. In this slide, the boss says to Mr. Tanaka, could you handle that orders as you usually do? If you translate it into the low context way, what the boss implies in the red letter could be this 1 to 4. It's very long. In a high context society, just only the one line. But boss could be maybe asking also other employees with the same phrase to handle the job, but each employee also analyze what they need to do and handle the order accordingly. So when this handle that order as you usually do is the question, and Mr. Tanaka needs to analyze from the past conversation and work with the boss and the project currently involved with him and handle the order. So he analyzed and in his brain these 4 items and then handle the order in the end. Now move to 2, mindset of learners in Japanese speakers case. And these 4 are the tendencies of focus in Japanese education. And one first, challenging the amount of knowledge, vocabulary used in question sentences and grammar is correct or not, knowledge of grammar, and reading translation skills to and from Japanese. And not many opportunities to practice or output what you learn, writing or speaking their opinions and ideas in class. And Japanese English education tends to focus on how to prepare for the entrance exams of high schools and university. And in those exams, as well as the term exams in schools, most of the time there is a tendency to focus on these, like challenging the amount of knowledge and on whether a vocabulary used in question sentences grammar is correct or not. And exams have more questions in grammar and the reading more than writing and speaking. They don't have many opportunities to practice or use what they learned in writing or speaking their opinions in class either. And because of learning background, I just told you, we have a lot of low self-esteem Japanese when it comes to speaking English. Also, the tendency of high context culture, as you see in learning part, it says learning occurs by observing others as they model or demonstrate, and then practicing. And accuracy is valued. They see the model example who speak good English and repeat the same, but be afraid of using your own words to express because it might be grammatically wrong, or they worry if it may sound funny. Always want the accurate, correct answers. With those reasons, Japanese learners are tend to be afraid of making mistakes, not confident of their speaking ability in English. When communicating more than the contents, stick to speak in a perfect grammar or smart way of talking without mistakes. In Japan, people learn most of the English grammar and study around 2,400 words in junior high school. And those are enough for speaking in a daily conversation, I think. However, because of the educational background and mindset we talked earlier, people tend to believe if they pile up the knowledge, they will be better in English too. And after learning a lot of words and knowledge, they try to speak with Japanese English speakers. And if they are not able to speak well, they think their knowledge and vocabularies are still not enough to speak out. In the consequences, there will be a gap between what you know and what you can actually use and output. However, Japanese grammar is very different from the one in English, and to be fluent faster, you may first need to know the main differences of those two languages and the interlanguage, which helps you to express yourself better in English and communicate well with English speakers. So, not only input, you need to practice to output what you understand in theory by self training to have proficiency. Mm, okay. Now, three, grammar differences and interlanguage transition and steps. And this is the answer when someone asks a Japanese how you go to work. And look at example one. 車通勤です. and kuruma is car, and tsukin is commuting, and this it is. This tsukin has the meaning of commuting to work. And if you say tsugaku and commuting to school, so in this one word has the meaning of the tsukin and going to work already. And if you just translate directly, car commuting is, it doesn't make sense. And so you need to change to interlanguage first in order to translate easily into English and to make sense. It doesn't have a subject and a verb. A lot of words and information lacks in the example one's first sentence. So put it in the sentence with enough information and words in the situation what the speaker wants to say in Japanese. And this is called interlanguage. Then place it in an English grammar order so that it finally makes sense. So car commuting is interlanguage. Actually, okay, put the first the subject, watashi wa, and car, kuruma, and de is by, and kaisha is my office, and ni is to, and ikimasu. Ikimasu is to go. So you place it in the interlanguage and change the grammar order to English. I go to my office by car. So you add subject and verbs, which was not actually in the first sentence, by interlanguage, and place the grammar, correct grammar order in English. So you need this step. Now, example 2. 明日までに完成するのは難しいと思います。If you translate the word itself in the same order in Japanese, tomorrow, by, to complete, different, think. This sentence lacks of information or words, and there is no subject verbs, and the verbs comes in the end. And so if you don't interlanguage the meaning well and just translate directly, it means I think it is difficult to complete it by tomorrow. I mean, if you just translate directly without interlanguage. And this is really reflecting the society in a high context also. Um, if Japanese say, I think it is difficult to complete it by tomorrow, it means I cannot complete it by tomorrow in Japanese culture. So to communicate well without any misunderstanding, you really need to change what you want to say into interlanguage first before translating into English. And in Japanese, mainly a lot of nouns are used, and Japanese speakers tend to translate as Japanese grammar order. However, in English, to start with the subject and verb is very important and address quickly in the beginning of the sentence, while Japanese use a lot of nouns and put together to make sentences and place verbs in the end, or often even drop verbs. In the high context explanation, it was addressed that disagreement is personalized. If you remember the list in the high context, and people are sensitive to conflict in the interaction part. So, from that point of culture view, Japanese tend to say it is difficult instead of no, we can't, to prevent a conflict or negative atmosphere. So, knowing interlanguage also helps you to pay attention to more advanced and natural expressions, and it prevents from keeping using expression in the wrong way for a long time. And this using the expression in the wrong way is called fossilization of the language. So, if you are paying attention more in the using interlanguage, the translation in English here will be I don't think I can complete it by tomorrow would be the best meaning to communicate. Okay. These are the reminders before you start self-training and when you do self-training. And first, before you start the self-training, if you don't know the basic grammar, buy the grammar book with CD or sound which can be downloaded from internet and study again. And the level can be the one learned in junior high school. So before starting, make sure that you know the basic grammar. And number two, learn a lot of verbs. In English, it is important to say subject and verb. And Japanese tend to learn nouns instead, so learning verbs is very important. Next, when you do the self training, and when you change to interlanguage, imagine the situation and try to find the subject and the verb quickly. Don't stick to find the exact translation of one word like commuting. Commuting, what is commuting in English? Only one word. Okay, you can say, okay, commuting is the situation that you go to work or you go to school. So you change to interlanguage and then make it in a sentence. So first imagine the situation and interlanguage it. And next, speak out the subject and verb as quickly as possible and add other detailed information later. First, subject and verb. English speakers may not be able to wait for that long being quiet until you start to say the subject and verb. So these are the 4 points you should be aware of before and when you do the self training. And for doing self practicing, materials are everywhere on the internet news or signboards on the street. Find several sentences for your interlanguage self trainings for a day and speak out and write them down and try the training every day. And remember, speak out or write down the subject and verb as quickly as you can. If you do it every day for 3 months, you may not need to look up words in the dictionary, and in 6 months, you may speak English easily. And I leave you some example Japanese sentences for your self-training. If you're not Japanese speaker but learning Japanese, you can compare how they are translated in your language and study how the interlanguage would be like between Japanese and your language. You can start the training from today. And good luck and have fun for learning a new language. Hope you will enjoy new languages. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed my presentation and I hope it may be useful for learning new language for you. And thank you very much and have a nice day.